everyone, let's take a look at today's math objective. I will be able to estimate decimal sums and differences using rounding. In our last lesson, we learned how to round decimals to a given place value. Today, we're going to take that skill and work with finding estimates for addition and subtraction problems using those rounding skills that we did in the previous lesson. If you forget how to round, I think you should probably watch that previous lesson one more time, or check your notes or check your book so that you can be fresh for this lesson. In your notes, please copy the following. We are on lesson 5.2, estimating decimal sums and differences. For our first example, estimate the sum by rounding to the nearest ones place. So for this problem, we are actually rounding a decimal to a whole number place value. Here's how to do it. If this is our problem that we want to estimate, 5 8/10 plus 7 1/10 is about, we're rounding them to the nearest ones place. So 5 8/10, is it closer to 5 or is it closer to 6? If we think of a number line and we have 5 on the low side, 6 on the higher side, if we were to graph 5 8/10, it would be closer to the whole number 6. To round 7 1/10 to the nearest ones place, we think of a number line with 7 on the lower end, 8 on the higher end. Well, 7 1/10 is only one skip over if you're counting by tenths. So 7 1/10 is closer to 7. So we've rounded both addends to the nearest whole number, to the nearest ones place. Now we need to take those two rounded numbers, 6 and 7, and add them together since we're finding an estimate with addition. So 6 plus 7 equals 13. So 5 8/10 plus 7 1/10 is about 13. Let's try another example. In this example, we're going to round to a different place value. Estimate the difference by rounding to the nearest tens place. (26 74 hundredths minus 13 6 hundredths is about what? So we're going to round these numbers to the nearest tens. Now, this does not say tenths. There's no TH at the end. So we're talking about rounding this to a whole again, but instead of the ones place, we're going to the tens place. Be very careful about how it asks you to round. So let's round to the nearest tens. To recap how to round, I'm going to underline the place value that they gave me, the tens place. Notice it's on the left side of the decimal point. I look to my neighbor. 5 and above, give it a shove. So I'm going to add 1 to my underlined number. So 26 rounded to the nearest 10 becomes 30. Notice I didn't really have to pay attention to my decimal values here because I'm rounding to the nearest tens place. Let's take the other number, 13 6 hundredths. Again, I can underline my tens, look to the right. 4 and below, let it go. So I'm going to keep the 1 and make everything a 0 behind it. So I have 10. 13 6 hundredths is closer to 10 than it is to 20. 26 is closer to 30 than it is to 20. You can always draw a number line to help you figure out what it's closest to. Just make sure you remember to focus on the given place value that they want you to round to. Subtraction. So let's subtract these two parts. 30 minus 10 equals 20. So 27 and 74 hundredths minus 13 and 6 hundredths is about 20 if you round it by the nearest tens place. That concludes our notes. So now you need to get your My Math book out and open. And we're going to begin on page 309. All right, lesson 2 in chapter 5, estimate sums and differences. One way to estimate is to use rounding. If you round numbers to a lesser place value, you are likely to get an estimate that is closer to the exact answer. So what that means is if you have the option of rounding a number to the nearest thousands or the nearest tens, the lower the place value that you choose to round to, the tens, is going to give you a more accurate estimate. Okay? Hadassah used a digital thermometer to find the morning temperature and afternoon temperature. She found the morning temperature was 31 and 3/10 degrees Fahrenheit, and the afternoon temperature was 37 and 6/10 degrees Fahrenheit. Estimate the difference in average temperatures. So what do I know? Let's always practice those problem-solving skills. What facts do I know? The morning temperature was 31.3. The afternoon temperature was 37.6. What do I need to figure out? I want an estimate of the difference of those average temperatures. I need to think of the word difference. In this case, it means I'm subtracting. And I want an estimate. So I'm not giving the actual answer. There are different ways that you can solve this because you can round to different place values. So one way is to round it to the nearest tens place. So let's take each of those numbers, 31.3 and 37.6, and round them to the nearest 10. I'm going to do my work right here to show you my thinking and my process. So rounding to the nearest 10, I'll underline my tens place, look to the neighbor, 4 and below, let it go. So I'm going to keep this at, whoops, wrong one. I'm going to keep this at 30. Now let's do 37 and 6/10. My tens place, 5 and above, give it a shove. So I'm going to increase the 3 to a 4, and it has to be in the tens, so I'm making it 40. So if I subtract 40 minus 30, I get 10 as my difference. Think about why they had us round 37.6 first, because it wasn't in the problem first. So think about why that could be. If you're thinking because in subtraction, we typically take our larger number, our greater number first and subtract the smaller number from that, then you're right, okay? And I say typically because as math gets harder, that won't always be the case, and you'll see that next year. All right, so in here we rounded to the nearest tens. Let's try it another way. Let's round to the nearest ones place. So I'm going to start with 37 and 6/10. Underline my ones place, look to the neighbor, 5 and above, give it a shove. I keep the 3. I increase the 7 to an 8. Now let's do 31 and 3/10. My ones place, 4 and below, let it go. So I'm keeping this at 31. If I subtract 38 minus 31, I get 7. So we have two different estimates for the same problem. The difference is about 10 degrees Fahrenheit or about 7 degrees Fahrenheit. The book has gone ahead and calculated the actual answer. The actual difference is 6 and 3/10 degrees Fahrenheit. So which one of these was closer or more accurate? Well, 6 and 3/10 is closer to 7. So rounding to the nearest ones gave us the more accurate estimate. That's because when you choose the lower place value to estimate and round, it will give you a closer answer. Let's go to the next page. Example 2. Estimate 5 and 26 hundredths plus 1 and 93 hundredths by rounding to the nearest 1. 5 and 26 hundredths. If I round it to the nearest 1, I'm focusing on the 5. 4 and below, let it go. So I keep this at a 5. 1 and 93 hundredths. My ones place. 5 and above, give it a shove. So I increase my ones to make it a 2. Take your two rounded numbers, 5 plus 2 equals 7. So that sum is about 7. As you start to get comfortable with this, you may not have to do all of these little pieces. For example, I can just look at 5.26 and say, well, that's close to 5. I can look at 1.93 and say, ooh, that's closer to 2 than it is to 1. 5 plus 2 is 7. You'll get better at this as you practice. At this point, I'd like for you to please continue on this page and do the guided practice questions. Then continue to the independent practice. Please read the directions to make sure that you're rounding to the nearest place value that they tell you to, because it does change. And then if you have time, continue to the problem solving, reading carefully and using your problem solving strategies. If at any time during this lesson you have questions and you're in the room with me, please raise your hand and I will come and help you. If you're at home and you're working on this, if you have a question, just jot it down in your book so that we can visit it when you come back to school. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.